Hi, I'm Darren and welcome to the DIY Bonsai Challenge, an online community-based learning experience where you'll create your very own bonsai tree. So you'd like to start in bonsai but not really sure how to get going. Maybe you've tried a couple of times and had a lack of success. Well, you're in the right place because I'm here to help you through this journey to create your own DIY bonsai. The first challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to get out there and start hunting for a plant, a tree, shrub, or maybe even a succulent to train as your bonsai tree. When shopping for plants to train as a bonsai tree, the main features that we're looking for are the base and the shape and thickness of the trunk. The thicker and more interesting the trunk is, the more appealing it will be as a bonsai tree. For a bonsai to look convincing, we like to have a bit of girth to the trunk. This trunk has got some thickness and some nice movement, but there's a disadvantage of buying a tree this size. Most of the growth is up here rather than down here where we'd like it for bonsai, and therefore the more work we'll have to do to bring that height into the range that's going to look best as a bonsai tree compared to a smaller shrub like this one. Smaller plants tend to have less thickness in the trunk, but the branches are lower down, and so we've got more to work with to create our tree image initially. Cotoneaster usually make excellent bonsai subjects. Most of them have very tiny leaves, they produce loads of flowers and some really gorgeous berries that add to the interest. We like to have something that's got a little bit of girth. We don't want anything that's really super thin and whippy because that spoils the illusion of age. And we also ideally want something with a bit of character to it. The trunk curves off to the side here, giving it some additional interest rather than just being poker straight and relatively uninteresting. We've also got a number of branches. These could well have a place in the final design of the tree, or if the trunk didn't have this interesting curve, we could cut back to one of the side branches that would take on the job of being the trunk. The other feature to consider is taper. Ideally, the trunk should be thicker at the ground level and get thinner as we go up. I also got this cherry tree, which is obviously much bigger than the Cotoneaster, and the trunk is thicker as well. It does have the disadvantage of all the foliage and buds being up here, none of the foliage and buds being down here. So I'm going to have to do some drastic pruning to stimulate more growth lower down so that we can use it in our final design. But the thing I like about this one is it's got a nice thick trunk to it. It's also got some options for the trunk line, and if we choose to keep them all, we've got the start of a branch structure forming. With the thinner trunked Cotoneaster, if I try to create too tall of a bonsai, it'll look stretched and skinny, and the proportions will feel off. It'll look like an immature tree rather than an old or an ancient tree that we try to evoke in the bonsai process. The thicker the trunk, the more in scale it looks with a bigger tree, while still maintaining the feeling of age. For this challenge, I recommend going for something on the smaller side, maybe a shrub that's got a bit of a trunk to it and plenty of branches low down to work with. Species and variety of plants that have smaller leaves tend to make more pleasing bonsai trees faster. This particular variety of cherry has medium-sized leaves, so they're not as small as some cherry varieties, but they're also not huge like you can get on some of them. It's all to do with the sense of scale. If we're creating a miniature tree, it follows that the smaller the foliage is, the more convincing that miniaturization becomes. So shrubs such as Cotoneaster that tend to have very tiny leaves, or the shrubby honeysuckles can have minute leaves, buxus, things like that. Anything that has normally small leaves make excellent starter bonsai. In order to hit the ground running, it's really important to choose a healthy plant. The healthier the plant is coming into the process, the more confident we can be in training it as a bonsai tree. If the plants are in leaf, you're looking for foliage that are a nice even colour for that species. You don't want any brown blotches or even aphid infestations, pests and disease. You want to see good extension growth from the previous year. You don't want to see a bulging pot because it's so root bound and chock full of roots. You're looking for a minimum number of dead twigs that are ready to snap off. It can be very tempting to go into the bargain basement section and buy a plant that's being sold really cheaply, but it's actually kind of sick. Although they cost a little bit less, the disadvantage is that you then have to spend 1, maybe 2 years nursing the plant back to health before you can do any bonsai training with it. There are a number of species that, though can be trained as bonsai and make very beautiful trees, they don't readily produce buds on old wood. If a species doesn't produce new buds on old wood, and there is no foliage near the first 12 inches of the trunk, we're going to be very limited in terms of how small we can make that particular plant. So if it doesn't back bud, look for live foliage that are near to the trunk and near to the base of the tree, so that you know that you'll have plenty of foliage and branches to work with in designing your bonsai. Sooner or later, you're probably going to come across a particular tree or shrub variety that is a fancy cultivar. A cultivar is an unusual example of a species that has some redeeming features that make it appealing to grow in gardens or as bonsai. For instance, a particular flower colour or a weeping habit. Oftentimes these fancier varieties of species are grafted onto the roots of a stronger plant. This makes it easier for nurseries to propagate them, to keep selling them. Oftentimes where the two plants have been joined or grafted together, there can be an ugly swelling if the graft hasn't been done very well and can look very unnatural. It tends to be something we try to avoid in selecting our bonsai plants. Having said that, if the graft is well done and well matched and the tree or the species has some redeeming features that you love, there's nothing wrong essentially in choosing a grafted tree. Just be aware that grafts can be good and they can be badly done. Finally, the climate that you live in is also important. Temperate trees need a dormancy, and if they don't get it, they will struggle and potentially die in 1, 2 or 3 years. Also, if you experience a lot of wet weather, maybe consider species that are adapted to wetter environments so that you don't have to provide lots of aftercare to keep the roots dry. The reverse is also true. If you live in a very dry environment, favour plants that are used to hotter, drier climates, such as Portuacaria afra. I've produced a list of species that I know make great bonsai and also features to look for when assessing a species for its suitability for bonsai purposes. Look out for those lists in the Facebook group, the Discord server, or in the email newsletter, and look out for the registration link to get the list sent to you by email. Visit a number of places, don't just buy the first thing you see, and in each place look at a number of different species, look at the shrubs, look at the trees, and really have a route around and see what you can find. Visit garden centres, nurseries, big box stores that sell plants, botanical gardens. Anywhere that sells plants has potential to be a supplier of bonsai material. You just have to think out the box and really root around to see what you can find. So now I want you to go out, search for a plant that you're enthusiastic about turning into a bonsai tree. So get out there, get searching, and let us know what you find. In coming video sessions, we'll discuss care of your plant, tools, and the repot process. If you're excited to accept this challenge to create your DIY bonsai tree, hit the links to join the community and make sure you register your interest, and we will be in touch shortly.